I can't believe that we're still having to talk about this. It's insane because it's so clear to anybody. It seems to me it's so clear to anybody with like just a sense of like what is good and just. I can't. I mean, like this isn't even something like that conservatives and liberals or leftists or whatever like. I've heard people on like conservative talk radio hosts to local community activists all say, oh, wow, this is a really terrible thing that happened. And like this was a bad decision to make. But there are still people in the city government that are defending the route that our city took. And so what am I talking about? I'm talking about one of our resident killer cops in Huntsville, Alabama. Apparently, the murder screen is broken at the Huntsville Police Department. I mean, my God. But last week, a city councilor defended their decision to pay for the defense of former Officer Darby, a murderer cop, in his defense trial. Now, for those that don't remember, and for those that aren't local, maybe let's review really quickly what happened. In April of 2018, people called 911 to assist a suicidal man, Jeffrey Parker. 2 HPD officers arrive on the scene, and they are doing what should be done in these situations. That is, they got to the scene, and they basically try to help this guy. They're talking to him. They're trying to de-escalate, not being threatening. They're just being like a normal person to this guy at the lowest point of his life. He has a flare gun to his head, and they and obviously they assess the situation. They're like, this is a suicidal guy. He's not trying to kill us. He's trying to kill himself. And what is our job as people who are supposed to protect our citizens? Our job is to make him not kill himself. That's what we should be doing in this situation right now. We should be trying to de-escalate the situation and make him pull his gun down. And the goal is that everybody leaves healthy and safe and alive, and maybe we can get this guy some help afterwards. Then Officer Darby shows up, and 11 seconds later, Jeffrey Parker is dead. He has been shot in the face by Darby's shotgun, despite never having made any threatening movements, gestures, or sounds. He's killed dead on the spot 11 seconds after the murderer cop, Officer Darby, shows up. 11 seconds. Officer Darby is then charged with murder by the Republican Madison County District Attorney, Rob Broussard. Okay, so at this point, any reasonable person should be thinking, oh, hey, the Republican District Attorney is charging a cop with murder? Man, maybe I should step back from my instinctive maybe I should step back from my instinctive need to defend cops, like to defer to authority, to the violence of the state. Maybe I should step back for a second and say, oh man, maybe this is like a unique situation.
Yeah, I think I have to really just jump in and emphasize that the district attorney, Rob Broussard, he is not just a Republican. He is a very pro-law enforcement, pro-police Republican. This is someone that, activists have had issues with in the past when it comes to other incidents of police violence.
Has he ever even once prosecuted a police brutality case? I mean, I don't know, but it would surprise me.
This is the only one that comes to my mind, and like I said, I know in previous incidents, he was by no means seeking transparency, or
Right,
he's
right.
not one of these reformer district attorneys that we've
Right.
heard about, like in Philadelphia. That's not this guy.
Yeah. So if you're if you're like a conservative politician who I back the blue, I love the violence that the state inflicts on its citizens most of the time, like that's totally great. Or if you're even like a liberal back the bluer, and you're like, maybe there are some bad apples, but like broadly speaking, cops are good. Like maybe at this point, we've got a Republican district attorney who's very pro law enforcement. Like, just take a damn step back and like assess the situation. So the police chief says that he's reviewed the body camera footage and he says that the officer is innocent. The police chief and the city council then votes to use taxpayer dollars to give an extravagant defense for the killer cop, ultimately about $150,000, not having seen the footage, not having seen any evidence. They're deferring to the judgment of the chief of police. Okay? Darby is ultimately found guilty of murder. The body camera footage is released, and at least one city council member has expressed regret for the expenditure of those funds, but not Frances Akridge. She still defends her decision and even said, this is just fascinating. I mean, fascinating. Maybe at the time you could defend the, oh, the police chief, he should know what's going on. Maybe I'm going to trust the police chief more than this, super right-wing district attorney. Maybe at the time you can say that. But she says that knowing what she knows now, she would have made the same decision. So let's listen to her defense at a recent city council meeting. Adam, go ahead and play the clip.
I want to address the Darby defense. If it were to happen again, God forbid, and the police chief, who in his estimation thought that the officer followed their training, and the mayor also thought that, it is not up to this council to review body camera. It is not, because all of these things do have a direct correlation to Supreme Court decisions.
Okay, pause it there. Don't change the scene. Just pause it there, because I want to interject really quick. She's saying that she's trying to defend her decision by deferring to defend her decision of deferring to the police chief with Supreme Court decisions. The Supreme Court, I emailed her yesterday. I asked her about the Supreme Court decisions that she was referencing. She referenced Graham v. Connor, which is about how you find a cop guilty or not, basically. Not about whether or not city councils should defer to police chiefs when they ask for $100,000 for a super special defense for their super special boy. That's not what Graham v. Connor is about. It's about how you determine guilt, not whether police officers deserve an extra special defense that normal citizens do not get. Let's continue with the clip.
I would vote again today if any employee, even a trash truck driver, was accused of a crime and it was recommended that we spend 50 cents a head on tax from each taxpayer to get the best defense possible. I would do it again today. Because that's what we do for employees. Any organization has to stand by their employees.
All right. And there we go. That's the relevance. That's why it came to my attention, because what she's doing here is she's trying to defend the decision to give a super special defense for a super special boy as some sort of as a pro-worker stance. And let's remember really quick that the police chief and the mayor are still saying that he followed the policy. They're still saying he followed the policy, and they still believe this case was wrongly decided. McMurray and Battle are out there literally today defending a convicted murderer, defending his murder. And she would still defer to their judgment.
Yeah,
Now,
and I wanted to interject here because someone brought this up in the YouTube chat, and it's a fair question about what does this have to do with the subject matter of this show. This is a union show. We talk about labor issues, working class issues, and I'll just say my opinion, and you're welcome to interject however you want to, Jacob. But in my opinion, for one thing, there's the hypocrisy of this statement to couch this in the pro-worker language, as you mentioned. There's the disparity between the way Darby has been treated by city government versus how any other worker would.
Right.
And I know she I think responding to some criticism there, made it a point to bring up someone who drives a garbage truck.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
But, that's a very different scenario.
Right.
And you asked me off air about teachers.
Yeah.
If a public school teacher in Huntsville, Alabama, were to be accused of sexual assault, does the Huntsville City Schools or the city of Huntsville or state of Alabama pay for their criminal defense? And the answer is no.
Right.
So, this isn't like, hey, we have a basic liability protection for our employees when they are indicted for their duties on the job. This was, as you mentioned, above and beyond any sort of, ordinary protocol. So I think that is one of the reasons why it's a relevant topic. I think it's relevant that we know what's happening in our community. Anyway, we are based here in North Alabama.
Right.
And the final thing I'll just say on that, I'll get off my soapbox, is that we know that police violence disproportionately impacts working class people.
Right. Bosses aren't going to be, murdered.
Right.
by
Jeff
cop.
Bezos is not concerned about police violence.
Right.
But our brothers and sisters who work in Amazon warehouses and work for these corporations, they do have to be concerned about it, particularly people who are racial minorities, people who are LGBT. Those aren't just things that are made up. That's statistical evidence.
Right.
There's a clear disproportionality in the way the police treat people in this country and here in this community. Huntsville, Alabama, for example, I believe it's about 10 times, 12 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana if you're black versus white in the city limits of Huntsville.
Yeah.
These are very stark disparities, and it does all tie together because it's ways in which working class people are divided and ways in which we are, subjected to violence by the state, in this same state, which will turn around and defend those inflicting the violence as opposed to defending and supporting the workers in a community who actually grow the community upon whose labor the community rests.
Right. Yeah. And so, one of the things that the first thing that a union will bargain for, one of the first things in a new contract, or one of the first things that they'll make sure gets made better or is re-upped in a new contract negotiation is just cause disciplinary procedures. Okay?
Absolutely.
And we talk about that, and one of the things that we liken it to is due process in our judicial system. And I think that's very important. And I would never advocate that anybody, no matter how heinous their crime, not get a competent defense.
Correct.
Everybody has a right to an attorney, and I believe, which Frances makes you think that she does. She makes you think that that she believes every employee should have a right to due process. And I don't know if she's just not aware of the reality that working people face, but most working people do not get due process on the job. Most working people, if you don't have a union contract, you are totally at the whim of your boss. And so, am I saying that there should not have been due process for the killer cop when he murdered somebody for his job? No, there should have been. And am I saying that there should be no due process for the killer cop when he murdered somebody as far as him going to jail or not? No, there should have been. And if Frances or anybody else has an issue with the level of defense that killer cops receive, then the solution is not to pay for, out of taxpayer dollars, a super special defense for a super special boy. The solution is to better fund our public defense so that everybody has a competent defense. Because cops aren't special. Cops are not a higher class of people. Cops are not better than me. Cops are not better than you. And they don't deserve better than you or me. So if the city council believes that the defense offered to normal working people, and this is why it's relevant to us as a show that advocates for the rights of working people through their collective action, if the city council believes that the defense that would be offered to normal working people, like a garbage truck driver or an Uber driver, is not adequate, then address that on a systemic level. Don't make a special exception for a killer cop. Like, let's start talking about maybe people should get due process for like robbery or assault or smoking weed. Maybe we should start talking about those people getting a competent defense before we start talking about people who murder somebody after they got there 11 seconds after they got somewhere. I mean, it's insane that you would still defer to the judgment of the police chief who believes to this day that the person followed protocol. And like, I don't care if they followed protocol. If they followed protocol and that was protocol, then the protocol is obviously against the law because it resulted in murder and they should change the protocol.
Right.
The answer is not that, he should get off scot-free because he changed the protocol. It means that the whole Huntsville Police Department is operating under a protocol that necessitates murder. And that's a problem. Okay, I mean, and we have and cops and office and military officers have a duty to disobey unlawful orders. So if the protocol does encourage murder, then the thing to do and the thing to encourage officers to do is to violate protocol. And it's so frustrating to me that wrapping this up in pro-worker language, because Jeffrey Parker was a worker. These people who good grief. Working people every day in this country face ramifications on their job and in the criminal justice system with much, much, much less due process than Parker got or than Darby got, the killer cop. And so
because Mr. Parker received no due process.
Right.
I mean, I think that needs to be very clear, as with so many others who have been victimized by police violence. That is the absence of due process.
Right.
When an officer can be judge, jury, and executioner within 11 seconds. Yeah. And not to hammer this home too much, but it is pretty obscene to think that our city government and the police chief have remained in their positions,
right,
and have the nerve to tell us, we the people, that not only was the district attorney of their own ideology incorrect, but the justice system itself was wrong, that the jury of his peers was wrong.
Right.
It's very bizarre, honestly. I'm with you. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't just cut their losses at some point and say, you know what, maybe this is the bad apple. Because
that's always the defense, is that it's a bad apple.
Right. Okay.
But they defend every single bad apple.
Right. At some point, you can't really use that defense if you're going to go ham on fighting for the bad apples.
Yeah, I mean, and so and like we would not advocate that teachers who rape children get super special defenses in criminal court.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
They should be entitled to the same amount of due process and defense as anyone else.
Yeah.
And if they did, in fact, commit those crimes and they are convicted on those crimes, well,
Then they
you
should
know
be
what?
punished for
They
it.
are an embarrassment to the profession.
Exactly.
And they are a shame to the profession. And any educator worth their salt would feel the same way.
Yeah.
And so that should be the response
Right.
from the HPD Chief McMurray and from Mayor Tommy Battle.
Oh,
yeah, that should be their response
Right.
of, you know what, the jury has spoken, justice
Right.
has laid out what has happened here, and we're ashamed, and we're sorry, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure nothing like this ever happens again.
Yeah.
How hard is it to even say this, knowing that
seriously.
you probably don't believe it and probably won't even do anything about it? But
Serious.
so that does take it to another level, and I think that's why it's fascinating, even when compared to these types of incidents in other cities and other states, because obviously
Right.
this is a
Yeah,
national
and-
problem. But Huntsville,
Yeah, and in another clip, she said something about like it's not the executive function to determine guilt, and all I'm doing is following somebody. And so okay, look, if you are principally opposed to, as the person who controls the purse strings, if you're principally opposed to looking at the evidence, then fine, like get somebody else to. Maybe get the HPCAC, the Huntsville Police Citizens Advisory Council, to review the evidence and make a recommendation to you if you don't want to for some reason. But like to defend still deferring to the police chief, who we know has, I mean, it's absurd. And Chad Chavez in our YouTube chat, which you can join if you find us on YouTube, The Valley Labor Report. You can get in there and you can chat with us. Chad Chavez says he also didn't like the way that Akridge said, even a truck driver, as though their labor was worthless, which of course that's even, I mean, just classist and insane and it's crazy. So,
yeah,
anyway.
and for those of you who somehow missed this, especially those of you who are not local, go back and check out the episode where we actually interviewed Chad, who is one of the community activists here in Huntsville, who's been trying to hold the system accountable. We had a great interview there. Me and David talked with him, and we offered quite a bit of coverage around those events. But check that out if you're curious, if you want to kind of go deeper with it. But yeah, it is a shame that we're still talking about it. It's certainly a shame to try to you really shroud the actions of City of Huntsville leadership in some sort of pro-worker language around this.
It's disgusting.
There are plenty of ways that they can demonstrate they are pro-worker.
Right.
This has nothing to do with it. But hey, if that's their new change of heart, if now moving forward suddenly
Every single
there's
worker
a pro-worker sentiment on the Huntsville City Council, then hey, just prove it to us.
Yeah, prove
Show
it to us. Like I'll make we'll talk about Frances Akridge in a much more positive light if she let's say pushes forward an ordinance in Huntsville City that eradicates at-will employment for everybody.
Yeah,
okay?
I
like
look
that
forward
would
to
be
seeing all city employees have collective bargaining agreements.
Right.
Moving forward.
And I look forward to her eliminating at-will employment within the city limits of Huntsville, because that's something that can be done.
Right, yeah.
New York City did that. They eliminated at-will employment for fast food employees. So if she really thinks that everybody is entitled to due process, then effing prove it. Prove that you think that people like the lowly garbage truck driver in your mind, or the lowly burger flipper, like if you think they deserve due process, then effing prove it.
Work sucks, we know, but you can make it better by organizing with your fellow workers. For more information, call or text the Huntsville Industrial Workers of the World at 256-651-6707.